Greetings. Hi, everyone. Thank you for your patience, and thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar, Get Ready for SAFe 4.0. My name is Steve Wolf, and I'm part of the Solutions Marketing team here at CA Agile Central, and I'd like to introduce today's speakers. First off, we're proud and happy to welcome Dean Leffingwell, creator of the Scaled Agile Framework.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. This is Dean.
Dean will be walking us through a lot of what's new in 4.0, but also joining Dean today will be Nick Clare, who's a transformation consultant here at CA Technologies. Hi, Nick.
Hi, folks.
So we're going to go ahead and get started quickly. We're a few minutes behind, and again, apologies for that. But before we get started, I want to quickly go over a few housekeeping items. So first off, audio and video are being streamed through your computer. So if you are having technical difficulties, please try refreshing your browser if you have problems with that. Be sure to check out the green resources widget at the bottom of your screen for some additional related content around today's topic, including a PDF of the slide deck itself. We'll also be sending out a follow-up email in the next couple days that will include a link to access the recording of today's webinar. And most importantly, please feel free to ask questions as we go through this webinar today. There's a chat window on your screen, and we'll address those that we can and have time for during the webinar, and we'll also leave plenty of time for that, but also follow up after the webinar with answers to the questions we're not able to get to. Finally, you are eligible to receive PDU credits for attending today's webinar, and we'll provide that information at the end of today's presentation. So with that, let's get started. And I'd like to start by asking a poll question. And as we go through that, Dean, I don't know if you'd like to maybe start by giving us just a quick little background as we wait a few seconds for this question to be answered.
Sure. You're probably online. You probably know. Actually, you probably know two things. One, we did an experiment with water on the table and the phone a little while ago, and that was a successful experiment. It turns out that you do not want to mix water with telephone cables. That was the reason for the delay. And secondly, I'm the creator of the Scaled Agile Framework. It's my pleasure to be here today with our partners Rally to introduce you to some of the features of 4.0. Nick Clare is with me to share some implementation experiences. So even though it's a webinar and we can't see you, we're going to try to keep it somewhat informal. We'll have some time for questions at the end, and we very much look forward to that because frankly, it's a lot more fun to interact than simply present. But our obligation is also to present the material. So looks like we've got some feedback already, Steve, on the first poll.
We do, and it's fairly consistent. You guys please comment on this as well, but it looks like we have a relative moderate level of maturity with scaling agile concepts and SAFe. A few advanced folks, but I think this is a typical spread in terms of what I see in audiences like this. Dean, anything?
No, I think so. I think we're starting to see SAFe adopted and various methods of lean agile at scale. We're not particularly ideological about what we do here. SAFe is a website. We think it's a great knowledge base, but as long as we're all working towards the same thing, bringing agility to the teams, helping them create a better working environment, higher levels of employee engagement, they build better software, they're happier about it. We at the enterprise level get to take advantage of that. So let's all just kind of continue to work together in the market to advance Agile and help bring the benefits of these incredibly unique and creative team constructs to the larger enterprise, and frankly bring those benefits to the individual practitioners in the larger enterprise, because many have been locked out due to governance or various rule bases that seem to prohibit agile development, and I think we're all working together to solve that problem.
Well, let's get started with today's content then, and again, thank you, Dean and Nick, for joining us today.
So initially, why am I here with CA? For a couple reasons. CA is our partner. I'm with Scaled Agile Inc. That's my employer. Our business is really quite simple. We worry a lot about what's the best way to develop software and large-scale systems in the market today. We work through our partners. Kind of interesting. We were both born in Boulder, Colorado, 13 or 14 years ago. And my daughter is a school psychologist, and she calls this one behavior parallel play. We worked together. We didn't always share our toys exactly the same way, but we didn't want to be too far from each other. So you see on the left the history of SAFe in the last 5 or 6 years. SAFE and the framework exist well beyond kind of the current timeline that I'll show today of 2011. Rally was there at very early days, and I shared a mission with some of the founders of Rally, folks from Web Methods and PEA that had become really convinced that there was a better way to write software. So we've been working on exactly the same thing. I work on the method. Rally has worked on tooling and consulting and support for that method. So we've grown up together. So I'm sitting here with people that I've known, actually some from Rally and some from former clients where we worked together over the last few years. So I'm going to talk briefly about 4.0 today, not in any depth. And you know, the good news about the framework is I don't have to talk in depth because it's freely revealed and publicly available. There's no login. If you visit the framework, we're not going to capture your address and send you an email. We just want to keep our knowledge in the public domain. I'm going to introduce that. I'm going to talk about one of the things that I feel most strongly about, and it's actually not a practice set. It's the new foundations layer. I'll talk about the next kind of major evolution in SAFE, which is SAFE for large value streams. We'll have some time for Q&A. We're going to be really cautious not to spill any more water on the phone while we're doing this. I'm sure we should, you know, we've done that once. I don't think we do that twice in one particular webinar. So let's get started. Let's talk a little bit about 4.0. So as I mentioned before, the scaledagileframework.com is publicly available. By the way, there is a What's New in SAFE 4.0 page. So when you go to the framework, you can find out, for those of you who are migrating from version 3, which is probably some of you, you can find out what's more. But like I said, the framework is right there. I had some discussions the other day with some people that said, well, we didn't know about this, that, or the other thing. I said, well, did you click and read it? Well, no, we're pretty sure SAFE has an opinion on this. I said, well, let's read the opinion and go from there. So we want to make sure that people understand that it's knowledge. I mean, we're certainly happy with what we've accomplished. It's a work in process. It's a website, and the website is there for you to use.
Yeah, and on the CA side, and these are actually live links. When you get access to the deck later, you'll be able to see these. But we have also a page around SAFE and our support for it. It's called our SAFE Toolkit, and it's recently been updated to discuss some of the concepts of 4.0. We have an approach we call Ready, Sync, Go, which is around standing up program teams, and there's information available about that and how that works, and we'll be touching on that in today's webinar. The last thing I'll mention, and we'll come back to this at the end, is we actually also offer SAFE training directly through CA. Both Leading SAFE and our SAFE SPC classes are very popular, and we'll give you some information at the end if you're interested in terms of how to register for one of those.
Okay, so it's probably just worth pointing out as well, this is not a deep dive on the stuff in SAFE. There's a huge knowledge base of stuff, as Dean says, out on the website. So we're just going to kind of dip into stuff and try and bring out some key points. And just to mention, Scaled Agile Frameworks, you know, they're pretty big operations. The framework's huge, and that's kind of where people like myself come in as transformation consultants. We spend a lot of our time actually helping organizations with the complexities of Scaled Agile. If you think agility adoption at team levels complex and challenging, then it's a whole different magnitude again at scale. So that's kind of where we come in.
And I don't know, Nick, I'd say huge, I would say right-sized.
Absolutely.
But why is the framework large? It's because we help people building really big applications. I'm fond of saying in SPC classes that if you people would build simpler systems, I'd build a smaller framework, but we scale to the needs at hand. So let's talk a little bit about SAFE 4.0 and talk briefly about the history. So we released the framework actually under a different brand at that time, about 2011. That was not its genesis. We'd been in the field for 4 or 5 years. For those of you who followed either my books or my blog, I started blogging on this topic about 10 years ago. And frankly, the blogging was just an excellent way to get input and feedback. So we do our development in the public domain. So for example, I've recently updated the CapEx and OpEx article. So there's a blog post about that. It's open for comments. So if you've got ideas and thoughts that you think we're right or wrong about, feel free to toss that in. And we're at version 1, 2, 3, and 4. And what does that mean? It means that we're learning. It means that every trip to the field, Nick, we learn something new.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I think has been really instrumental in the development is, you know, for a while it looked like we're going to have 3.0 and lean systems engineering as parallel frameworks, and we're all getting a bit worried about that. And I think one of the things that really shows how the SAFe framework's evolving is that we've now got 1.4.0, and it's not a shoehorned kind of operation. It's a well-engineered, crafted framework.
No, it actually merged pretty well, and you're right. Why was there 3.0 and LSE? Because we couldn't predict in advance. I mean, my hindsight is a lot better than my foresight. It's just much better. But at the time, we wanted to make a branch for systems engineering because we couldn't say that, hey, there's the Agile Manifesto and some lean principles, but I can build a satellite with this, you know, welcome changing requirements late in development. The answer is that's true, but it kind of depends, not right before the satellite launch. So we made the branch in LSE, and the branch was out there about a year and a half. Every article in that branch was open to comments. And we brought in a lot of systems builders, I would say a dozen or so, including some of the medical equipment people that were building systems that were, you know, kind of man-rated and high assurance. And we learned a lot, and one of the things we learned is that, you know, when we created the initial version of LSE, we created a new layer, and we called it the systems layer. We called it the system of systems layer. And we started exploring, you know, solution intent and the notions of how you can understand intent without having to kind of predefine requirements, and how requirements can really evolve even in the context of really large systems. So we had 3 layers, and the layers was the team, the program, and the system layer. And then the folks that we were working with said, well, that's interesting, and we're really glad to see you reflect the system of systems, but maybe we're Panasonic and maybe we build infotainment systems for automobiles. Well, our solution, our entertainment center, lives in a system of systems, and system context really matters. But guess what, Dean? It's part of our portfolio too. So that portfolio layer that you have in SAFe, we need that. So I was frankly quite reluctant to think about just expanding to another layer. But in the end, I think you'll see that that was the right answer. It became compellingly clear. Nobody wanted 2 frameworks. I didn't want them either. It's just that without a huge sandbox, we couldn't figure out that we could just, you know, make the right modifications to SAFe. So they did evolve to version 4.0, and 4.0 is both more modular, more scalable, and it certainly handles the larger needs. So let's talk a little bit about the labeling. We call it for SAFe for Lean Software and Systems Engineering. Now, you might not be building a satellite or the Orion spacecraft, which some of the folks that we're working with are building, but you might be building a medical device that's subject to certain types of verification and validation processes. You might be building a system that has some hardware that has really long lead times. And you might look at something like continuous integration and say, that's great for you, but we're building molds, okay? So, and the cost of change gets really high over time. So we can't decide after we've gone to the manufacturer to change the mold. So we have some things that can migrate really fast and be very agile, and there's some things, frankly, that require more definition up front. Well, that's just the real world. So I think what we do with SAFe for Lean Systems, Software and Systems Engineering is recognize that there are all kinds of applications, but they can all be lean and agile, you know, albeit to different effects at various elements.
I think that's true. I mean, it's particularly true in complex and large systems. You know, often you find clients and people that think that scaling is kind of like 36 teams. But it's when you start talking about 200 plus teams that it really starts to get, that's when you start to need some of these bigger scale constructs.
Exactly. Now, as you probably know, but you probably checked SAFe before you logged in, we had to deal with that problem. So we did indeed come up with 4-level SAFe, but it's not everybody's standard representation. So we actually have a version of that. We call it 3-level SAFe for the lack of any clever marketing term. That is a concatenation of the portfolio layer on top of the program and team. And one of the reasons it took us a little longer than we thought it might to do that was we need to have good semantic integrity. So if you have a portfolio view of the world, which I think is unique and SAFe, the way to think about larger initiatives. We were talking to some banking clients over the last few days that really understanding the nature of the portfolio, the evolution, the epics, the strategic themes is their larger problem. We needed to be able to address that as well. But at the same time, we didn't want to walk away from all our predecessors here, and we wanted to make sure that we didn't repeat a mistake that we made in version 3. So version 3 level, SAFe 4.0 is backwards compatible. And that means that if you're in a 3.0 implementation, you can for sure continue on that website. It's fully supported. It's at version 3.scaledagileFramework.com, but you don't have to. And the reason is that whatever your roles and artifacts are, they're going to be carried in 3-level safe already. So we really want you to kind of point your browsers to the new Scaled Agile Framework, because there's a lot of new features there for you. But like getting a new copy of Microsoft Office, your old stuff should still work well while you adopt a new model.
Yeah, and that's exactly the approach we're taking at several clients right now, is to say, hey, you don't have to feel like there's a big transition or migration path to 4.0. It's pretty well there. If you're doing 3-level 4.0 safe, then you're pretty well backwards compatible with the stuff you know well. There's a few things here, enhancements here and there you can use, but you don't have to use them if you don't want to. You're fully ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let's talk about some of the enhancements in 3-level safe, and we'll do that before we get to the next step.
Hey, Dean, and let me interject here real quick. Please feel free to ask questions. We do have time reserved at the end of the webinar, and we'd love to hear what's on your mind, and we'll answer as many as we can towards the end of the webinar.
Yeah, and folks, you really have to, because we didn't prepare any canned questions. So we're really dependent on you here. This is an audience participation seminar. I don't think I've ever prepared a canned question. If I have to prepare a canned question, it was a terrible presentation, and nobody was interested. So we don't have any in our back pocket. So Steve's going to be watching them come through. So let me talk about something that's absolutely elemental to SAFE, but somewhat different in terms of the presentation. We had in version 3 of SAFE, we've always focused on leadership. I think you know that's a thing we care about, and the reason is that Agile at the team level is incredibly powerful and very well defined, but it doesn't have roles and responsibilities for leaders, and we do. People need bosses. They need the personnel and career development responsibility, and our leaders haven't abrogated their responsibility for outcomes. So we teach leadership. As a matter of fact, that's almost all I do, teach leadership about the new methods, and we had them on the big picture, and there's some other things as well. But we didn't have, for example, communities of practice, which we're quite dependent upon. I mean, if you think about the move to a lean agile environment, you're moving to a view that delivers value across the silos. And that means that, developers work with testers and they work with product owners and product managers, and that's great because value flows that way. But what about their skills? What about everybody learning Hudson? What about we bring in a robot or some new form of test automation? Does that become a localized phenomenon? And the answer is no. We would like those folks to continue to work together and build the communities of practice or the guilds that they need to be able to advance those skills.
Sure. The other thing I think this particular slide, or the foundation layer in particular, brings out is that the common perception you get when you go into clients is that, hey, SAFE looks really big, it looks quite prescriptive. And I think this is the SAFE 4 has done a lot to bring out this idea, well, hey, there is a lot there, but if you want to maximize your likelihood of success and you want to be flexible as well as minimize overprescription, then learn and internalize some of these sort of key practices. And the foundation layer is a great place to start. If you can internalize that stuff, then you're really going to straighten up and fly right.
It also gives us a new surface that doesn't confuse the issue with delivery, right? So things like communities of practice and core values and the lean agile mindset, things that we really treat very special, don't have to just jam themselves next to a delivery element in the big picture. I'll talk very briefly about just one or two of those elements. I'll pause on one more than the other. First of all, there's the leadership element, and we get a lot of our, I guess, I know you can probably tell, or you've seen my picture, I'm either, 40 years old, and this is what happens to you if you manage software development for too many years, or more likely, I'm probably 60 plus and been at this quite a while, and I don't believe that everything new by definition is really zippy. And not everything old, by definition, is stupid. I think we need the best of the new and the best of the old, and we integrate. One of my heroes is Deming, and reading his book, I think it was a summer and a half ago now, Only Management Can Change the System. And his statement is not enough that management commit themselves to quality and productivity. They must know what it is they must do. And that responsibility can't be delegated. So we don't take a position that says, Nick or CA is going to come in and train the teams and teach them ways of working the leaders don't understand. We're going to start the opposite. We're going to start with leadership, get as high in the organization as we can, and start with things like the lean agile mindset. And what we mean by that is that some things are immutable, some things are fixed. I mean, let's be prescriptive about something. If your organization can't look the Agile Manifesto, and more importantly, some of the principles behind it in the eye and say, we can do that. We can trust our teams. We really do believe that requirements and design can emerge. We don't have to impose all that. We really believe that even in my really big system, in my Orion spacecraft, we can deliver software more frequently. Maybe I can't update the case or the power supply, but I should be able to update the software. We believe that, and we believe that individuals' interactions trump process and tools, and what the framework tries to do is to create a process, really an environment whereby that can happen. And then the House of Lean, which is a deeper dive, not one that we can go into very far here, but the House of Lean has at its root value. I was involved in a discussion a few days ago that people were going, well, why would we do this? Why would we adopt Agile? Why would we do SAFe? And I said, it's very simple. We're striving together for the sustainably shortest lead time.
Right.
And they said, you're right, we are. So let's continue that conversation.
With the definition of lean, you get just one clean. That's what our objective is. If you look for definitions of Agile, you get several different answers. Mm-hmm. I think I wanted to pull out one aspect of the House of Lean. The innovation pillar, although it arrived in 3.0, it came pretty much from Lean systems engineering. Innovation is a big deal, you know. It's a business's lifeblood, and it's a great example of how in 4.0 we can apply the Lean principles in a much more kind of pragmatic and less abstract way. And that's kind of, again, what I really like about 4.0 and sending clients is, hey, there's a lot more advice now about how you're going to be able to apply these practices in the Scaled Agile Framework. And if you understand the values and principles behind them, you'll be able to adapt those as well. So innovation has now got the prominence I think it's always needed. I always had a hard time before getting that across to clients. Innovation, flexibility, the Lean principles behind it, and variability, etc., are all built in now.
Yeah, if agility doesn't help us drive innovation, right, kind of what's the point? Yeah. And you know, that's another body of knowledge, and I think that's what I think SAFe reflects. We don't ignore the Lean startup movement because it happened after we started doing the framework. We figure out what makes sense in there. And if you have an agile development model where funding can be short-term, where I can fund the first 10% of an epic and decide if that makes sense, I can strive for a milestone of an MVP, I can start focusing the attention of my business owners on, you know, innovation accounting, because the problem with the traditional business case is that all the ROIs are basically late-breaking indicators. Mm-hmm. So it's great to say you're going to get this ROI, but how do you really know that? So those ideas we embed as well, and we're not particularly prideful about where ideas come from. It's kind of like an agile team. Yeah. Ideas can come from anywhere, and the goal is to be able to harvest those ideas. Yeah. And then, as probably already kind of hammered too much on the notion of leadership here, but this is a leadership-led initiative. The teams know what they need to do. Frankly, they've been reading Scrum books for almost 20 years and XP books. It's not really a team problem. They know how they want to do development. Our job is to really facilitate a process where they can do what they know they want to do. I was at actually a UK public sector company the other day, and there was about 200 people in the room, and I said, how many are on an Agile team? And most all were, and I said, raise your hand if you're already on an Agile team. And they did, and I said, now keep your hand up if you are happy to return to your former way of working. And I'll be honest, there was one person in the room who left their hand up. The other 130 hands went down. So when I think about SAFe, I think about a process that facilitates creating an environment where the core values of agility are inherent for the teams, appreciated by management. But as we know, you're on this call because that's simply not enough. Here's some things that haven't changed in SAFe. And honestly, I put this slide back in because I was talking to Nick, and he said, well, don't skip the core values, because we talk a lot about code quality and how difficult it is to execute large-scale programs on alignment and transparency. So I said, I agree it's important. It's not new, but let's talk about it anyway. Right.
Yeah, so the core values, that you can describe them in terms of a story, which is the backbone of what you're doing when you adopt SAFe. The scaling is making sure that your system of systems, your cross-team software will work and systems will work. You want to demo and test them pretty regularly to get feedback on whether it's working or not and what do you want to do next. So you need continuous integration across all teams and arts. So that's okay. That's an extension of good old XP practices that we've known for years. That's great.
It is.
We need some synchronized integration points. So in order to make sure that we've got some reasonable places across the teams, across the arts, in order to assess whether what kind of system we've got and it's working or not. So therefore we're going to need synchronized integration points, synchronized cadence. That means we're going to need to plan across teams and arts. Okay, so we've introduced the idea in Phase 3 and before about planning across teams. Well, as we get more and larger and more complex systems, we'd start to talk about, well, hang on a minute, we've got some dependencies across those arts, and a value stream in any case is not constrained by any particular size of art or number of arts you've got. So you need alignments. You need synchronized planning across those teams and arts. So we're going to apply the same principles that work well at Scrum, and we've got a fractal called the program layer where we apply that in the PI planning. And there's an element of that too coming out into the new stream at the new level as well, which we'll talk about later. You've got to get alignment. So this is the point I'm constantly making with our customers is alignment across leaders, teams, and arts, and on your cadence, and on what to produce. You need alignment on your content authority. So to get that alignment, you need transparency, no hidden agendas. We use objective economic criteria to decide how we're going to prioritize or sequence the work. And I've noticed time after time how great a leveler things like weighted shortest job first are at producing that transparency. No longer is it a kind of I'm the most highest paid stakeholder in the room, you better do what I say. It becomes much more of a reasoned analysis. And it's not done by kind of forcing them into it. It's very curious how it becomes much more open and transparent. Transparency builds trust, and trust that enables flexibility. Flexibility enables innovation, and all those things help you become more productive and successful. But these core values for me really do define the whole backbone of the Scaled Agile Framework.
We saw transparency at work yesterday in a case study presented by a bank. It won't be a public case study. It was in a private setting where the VP described how after they've got their feature teams oriented, SAFe is heavily, I'll say it, biased towards feature teams, and they had the velocities established, that they visualized all the work and they created a single epic board for that division of the bank. And on the epic board, they would estimate big things and story points and knew what the velocities were, and they would see the epics stack up. They added weighted shortest job first as a common mechanism for dealing with the epics. We'll let that go by a second. Some elements of audio you can't control.
Yeah,
right.
like water.
Right. Here we are in London with a common thing. But anyway, it was really simply flushing out and showing the work and using weighted shortest job first amongst its key stakeholders. It was a big breakthrough in terms of their ability to execute. In the last, it's close to a year now, and spawned partially by LSE, but also kind of driven by what we need beyond the manifesto. We worked hard to establish a set of 9 key principles. And if you look at these, some of these are concatenated, so we kind of cheated the system a little bit. We didn't want 15. So for example, number 6, one of my favorites, visualize and limit work in process. That's what that bank did the other day. Reduce batch sizes. Well, weighted shortest job first, in a sense, causes you to do that. It sends smaller jobs through the system, less requirements, and manage queue length. So he could look at the left of his board and say, well, if we do these sequentially, given the capacity that we have, it's going to lay out over this period of time. So that's a power pack number 6, and there's really quite a lesson in there. Others are power packed as well, like number 9. Every authority on lean from anybody, from Shingo through Deming to the contemporary writers through Kennedy and Ward, say you have to decentralize decision making. And of course they have people and people's welfare and empowerment in mind, but what they're talking about is flow. So frankly, if you don't decentralize decision making, you go slow. So we can talk about the personal benefits, the empowerment and how engagement is happier, but let's just talk about the practical benefits of how critical it is to decentralize decision making as well.
Yeah.
So these are front and foremost now. They were always on the side, they were there, but you can't print a copy of the big picture anymore that doesn't bring the principles along with it.
So I think the concatenation to keep it down to 9 is great, but I think actually does a great job at making it less abstract again. You can read these principles more as a kind of story for implementation. The value each now jumps out at you. So that's another thing I really like. And to take it a step back a bit, the successful leadership or the successful implementations where the leadership teams step back and look at the way things work, how these principles apply, and even sometimes with a little help, these are the ones that then get success. And so, again, it's about internalizing the principles behind the framework that will help you get a long way with understanding how you can tailor it to your organization.
And I have a version of this deck that has the implementation model and the benefits later. And Eric and Nick, when we were talking about this, said, well, you know, you get the benefits when you have the right mindset and you understand the principles, and you apply SAFe. So we moved them up. So we have a pretty simple strategy, which is that when we ingrain the principles and train people, they come up with a new way of working. And one of the things that I tell you does amaze me, and I see it again and again, I haven't seen it just only in this space, but when you're talking about organizational change and you want people to adopt new values and principles, learn new techniques for problem solving or system validation or test automation, don't we have an obligation to train them? And yet, oftentimes that doesn't happen. So training is just a requisite part of the program. So if your managers and teams and people, you know, helping with test and test automation, if they're not up for any training, you're going to struggle with any organizational change, and this will certainly be on the list of those you struggle with.
Absolutely. I mean, we really emphasize the value of getting real leadership buy-in through the training, not just the training. It has to be followed up with mentoring as well. But if you don't get that leadership buy-in, you'll get some way with SAFe, but you'll miss that absolutely crucial strategy to execution link. You won't get the benefits that you're really looking for with SAFe.
You know, and you won't scale.
You won't scale.
Because the VP of Finance is part of the solution in understanding the problem of project-based cost-based accounting. And if you do it well with version 3 or version 4, you'll achieve some of the same benefits that others have. And I know you're on the phone looking at this data and you're going, well, that guy Leffingwell, he's selling something. Well, the framework is free, but let's be honest, it's a commercial product too. We know, we're here to make a living like others. These aren't my numbers. These aren't our numbers. They come only from the case studies. So I would ask you not to believe a word I say about anything in terms of results, but go to scaledagileframework.com case studies. There's 22 there from manufacturing, retail, toy manufacturing to building combines to running a bank. And is this the benefits of SAFe? I think this is the benefits of Lean Agile at scale, done well, and I think SAFe is a way to approach that problem.
Yeah. There is a kind of risk as SAFe becomes more and more widely adopted that people start adopting it as a thing to do. I'm starting to see that with some customers now. So we go in and we ask, we still need to understand the problems you need to solve, understand the values and principles, and then use SAFe as a guide, as a tool to help you get where you want your business to be. But make sure you understand the problems you're trying to solve. It's kind of key again. So these results are fantastic, but really understand what you want to get. What's success for you?
Let's talk a little bit about some of the larger issues. Now, I failed. I won't go back with my slides here, but I failed to describe in version in 3-level SAFe some of the things that are different, and I'll stop and describe them there now. One of the things that's different is the incorporation of Kanban at the team level, and the incorporation of prototypical Kanban systems at the program and team levels. We describe that now. We've really opened up the envelope. Some things are fixed in SAFe. We believe that in order to know that the system is sprinting, you have to show it off. So if a team is on a continual flow basis, that's okay. If that's the way they want to manage their work. At the same time, we want that work to integrate with others. So we hold that iteration boundary, fairly sacred. The system demo, we don't say, oh, you don't really have to have a demo, because what's going to happen is the system won't integrate. So we've opened that envelope quite a bit for the team level to really provide additional flexibility. And I, for one, never really bought into Scrum versus XP, or we used to use Scrum, and now we use Kanban. they're different things, right? We have specific owners in Scrum, like specific roles in Scrum, like the product owner that, frankly, I don't know how to live without that. I don't know how you do decentralized decision making if you go to a flat file where nobody can make a decision for the team. At the same time, what Scrum team want to understand the flow through the system? And are they really worried about task management and task burn-up, or are they really worried about the yield of features? So don't be shy about mining a little bit the three-level SAFe and looking for some of the unique things. But probably the largest impact is the introduction of the full SAFe. So if you hit the expand button, you get the new value stream layer. And let's talk about that value stream layer a little bit in a little further detail, because there's a number of new constructs here. One of the new constructs that's included here is the economic framework. Now, as you look at this picture, you might recognize that well, do I only get an economic framework if I have a value stream consideration? And the answer is of course not. So you see elements here, things like step-based development. You have the ability to mute whatever's happening there, or something interesting is happening. Right. We'll look into that. Maybe see if we can solve that problem. So our apologies again for whoever has the sniffles. But if you look in the lower left of this guy, there's this thing called solution intent. Well, we could have called it requirements, I guess, but everybody knows what that means, and they know when you do it. You do it early and up front. Well, that's actually not the case. Many of you are probably subject to verification and validation or audit to specificity. Well, none of those processes, imposed by governments or agencies say, yeah, you have to write the specs up front and then prove that you did those specs. That's not the case. You introduce a medical device by making a set of labeling claims that says it works exactly this way. So system intent can be a thing that evolves over time, and then it's captured at a point in time and then reflects the current behavior. So that's quite a story under there. There's also additional roles, because if you're coordinating cross value streams, you're going to see different types of things that need to be done. We call that the value stream engineer, another train engineer, just because we have this agile release train metaphor. Now, I'll also tell you that SAFe is a taxonomy. That's one of its benefits. We define things. Not every label's perfect. I mean, does a product owner own the product? Is the release train engineer an engineer? No. But they're just words that we use to create new ways of thinking about the problem.
Absolutely. I guess one of the things I wanted to bring out about the value stream as well is that value stream has always been there, obviously. That's kind of how SAFe always organized around value. One of the things we saw in 3.0, which was a bit of a risk of a failure case, was when you had several collaborating arts who would push decisions up into the portfolio level, which perhaps could be made at a lower level. Mm-hmm. So thinking of the lean principle, the decentralize where you can, that created too high a level, created a bottleneck, stems flow. So I think one of the nice things about bringing it out explicitly in 4.0 is it does give you that ability to make a centralized decision in terms of the value stream, but not push it up to that portfolio level.
There's some additional intelligence behind the value stream. We're learning value stream thinking is a lean construct. We brought that across from lean because if you're trying to maybe simplify a purchase order processing or manufacturing a widget, you need to know the value stream. And while you have to click on the value stream to find it at the portfolio level, which we'll talk about in a second, I want to make a key point, which is working with a group a couple of days ago, and their charter is frankly to do some dramatic cost reduction in a big area in this particular enterprise. And they're systems people. So the idea was, well, which systems can we deprecate and where are we going to get costs out of the systems? But we looked at that and said, no, really, you are systems people. That's true. But your customer is the enterprise value streams. This whole organization has a set of value streams, and the systems need to support that. So SAFe defines the difference between what you would describe as an operational value stream, maybe making a widget, or a operational value stream might be I build a customer, did I get my payment, and the development value streams, which are the systems underneath that. So with that thinking, we were able to parse the challenge that organization had into first actually understanding the operational value streams. What are the steps? Then you can imagine on the wall, you draw the steps out, and then you start identifying the systems. Well, we use SAP here, we use a spreadsheet here, we have a database that we run over here, we have a web-hosted back office here, and then you start recognizing the connections between the systems and the value stream, and you start to have a much more intelligent conversation about how to think about the problem.
I think just the last point on the value stream. I mean, when you're using set-based design as well as part of your solution intent, I think there's another practical instantiation there, the leading principles. In this case, keeping your option open as long as possible for the optimum economic outcome as well. So again, another crystal instantiation of that principle.
Yeah, and I think I saw that come together with a company that's a pretty agile shop for sure, about 200 or so people. Super struggling with milestones. And you might ask yourself the question, well, they're agile, why do they have milestones? Because they live in the real world, and because there are certain seasons involved, and when they go to update a system, it has to be done at a certain time. And what we talked to them about was really set-based design, and that's now included in SAFe in the value stream level. Now they didn't need to run a value stream, but they needed set-based design, because if you have fixed milestones, you need two things to succeed. Number one, you're going to need some options. You're going to need to say, well, we could maybe do this and maybe not. Maybe we need to think about that problem differently. And you're going to need some excess capacity. And that seems really bizarre, saying, where's your excess capacity come from? It comes from designing a system that makes commitments below the full utilization. So we used a little bit of set-based thinking to say, in approaching this milestone, what are the range of options? Could you deploy on the old system if you had to? What if we just had one person keeping that alive? Did you have to do a brand new skin on that website, or could you leave the old skin in place? Or could you get by with not reproducing the set of features that aren't used so much in the old application? So it's really when this knowledge pool comes together and somebody understands the problem and they say, well, set-based design is at the value stream level, but set-based design is just an approach to helping assuredly meet milestones with reliability. It also is an approach that says don't decide too early. So the notion of set-based design belies the point-based design, which is that it's phase 2, it's time for design complete. When is the design complete? Well, never, but it's pretty dang good when my customer is saying I'm using that and it works real well. And we've paused on a slightly different slide here, which is that when we added the level, we needed to start thinking yet bigger thoughts. And when you think about that satellite, they're thinking about, the resolution of the camera on that satellite. They're thinking about new capabilities. So we introduced the notion of capabilities. They're a lot like features. They just operate at that additional level of abstraction. And I think we now understand as well that there's a fair amount of scalability involved. And I saw a talk the other day where some consultants were looking at SAFe, and they said, well, we're building a medical device and it only takes 5 teams, but that solution intent is really critical for us. And we use an economic framework to make our decisions about cost of goods sold versus cost of delay. Maybe I could eliminate an IC and it's going to take me 2 months to write the code. That means we wouldn't have that IC. I could handle that in software. And the question becomes, should they? Well, you have to understand the economic framework for that. And by the way, we have to do traceability. Does that mean we can't be agile? No, it means that we still want to iterate and we want to manage the risk through fast feedback, but we want to approach the conclusion slightly different. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we're huge fans of Kanban. Hey, we're fans of what works here, okay? So if it works and we learn it, we're going to incorporate it. We're going to, some people call us the Borg of methods. Okay, well, so what? We Borg stuff in. If something new comes along and if people start to understand how to visualize the flow of work throughout the enterprise, well, we want our customers to be able to use that as well. So consequently, we employ Kanban now throughout the system. Now I see another poll question coming up. Do you want to comment?
Well, I was just going to say this is pretty good from our point of view because it gives us a great opportunity to stress to customers and people implementing SAFe that, hey, one of the lean principles again is not overloading the pipeline, and the pipeline of flow is throughout the system. This kind of strengthens that whole idea that there's a flow throughout the system. And as much as possible, we want to avoid overloading at the top so that we avoid overloading throughout the pipeline. But also it brings out this whole idea of that, well, not everything's centralized, so not everything necessarily comes down from portfolio through to capability, feature, and story.
Sometimes local context.
Exactly that. So sometimes they're the best people to make the decisions. They can give them the budget to do what they think is best, and within that context, they can create their own capabilities and features. And I think, again, this is something that's been strengthened rather than added to safety.
Yeah, it's just called out more explicitly,
Yeah.
and recognizes the fact that we all work against a strategy, and strategy is emergent in the larger enterprise, but companies decide to be in a business. They decide to build a CRM system or a help desk or an infusion pump. So as a team member, I don't necessarily get asked as whether we should build an infusion pump. Probably I was hired because we build them.
Yeah.
At the same time, I become one of the world's foremost experts on the capabilities of an infusion pump, and I want my input included in the process. So that combination of local content and global content is how strategy and implementation meet.
Excellent.
Well, let's go ahead and take this last poll question. And good news is we've had several questions come in, and we'll get to those in just a second. A lot of great questions. But let's go ahead and take a look at the poll first. And it's a simple question around the new value stream level. And as you think about your business, whether or not you see potential application of this in your work. So let's take a look at the results.
So vote quickly. We need your feedback now. I'm really curious as to how the value stream is going to play with this particular group. Interesting. Okay. So here we have about 23% of the respondents. They were building big systems. Others aren't sure. Hey, I respect that too, because after 11 minutes of talking about the value stream, I probably wasn't sure either. I wasn't sure 6 months ago that I was going to have to build it. So we certainly appreciate that feedback. Now, with that, we're at the end of our time box, but we didn't cut you off. We actually got to the point, I think we are, aren't we, at a place where we can see what questions we have?
Exactly. So let's ask them.
It's a miracle.
Yes. So let's start with one from Pedro. And Pedro's asking, what is the approach regarding existing job roles that do not exist in SAFE? For example, an engineering lead or a head of integration. Do you try to fit those roles into the framework by adapting their responsibilities, or do you do something different?
Okay, so I have to give the consultant's answer, it depends. And let me give you a couple of examples of where it depends and it's not necessarily a fun answer. So just this week, I had some people come up after a session, and they worked for basically in the portfolio level, and they were the requirements teams. They created specific requirements for epics that translated into work that gets done downstream, and they wanted to know what their role was. And as cautious as I could, I would say you're going to have to find another role, because we don't have a structure whereby, requirements analysts live independently of the teams. Now, a BA operating with a team as a product owner totally makes sense. Other cases, project managers. If your organization was very vertically oriented, we have a tremendous respect for project managers, because they're the only people that could get things done around here. But as we figure out better, easier ways to get things done, project managers assume different types of roles. Often they may become product owners, some become RTEs, some become epic owners because of the type of people that can go cross-cutting. But you can't just look at SAFE and make a translation. There's no, quote, engineering manager in SAFE. Well, there are lean agile leaders. So did we eliminate everybody who was responsible for hiring and firing and recruiting and personnel development? Absolutely not. It's just that they don't show in the delivery. So I would say the transition is careful. It can be awkward. And if we think about leaning the enterprise, is it likely that every single role in your organization is well suited to the new way of working? How could that be true on any change?
Right. I think every organization I've been in, there's been a slightly different, or sometimes radically different way to solve that problem. How do we map our current roles and job titles to what SAFE's asking us to do? And it's all about the responsibilities and accountability rather than the particular history or background of the role.
Yeah, let me add to that. The responsibilities are clear. The role titles don't matter.
Right.
But there's no responsibility, I feel bad about this small team. There's no responsibility for somebody to hang out with a business initiative and write the 40 or 50 page requirement specification that gets associated with an epic that hasn't hit the ground yet. So there are things that are definitely going to change.
For a real quick second question from Martin around roles, and this is what new roles or roles would you expect to see within a solution management team? What are the new concepts in SAFE 4.0?
Okay, so I'm going to start by answering that at the, I'm going to start with the basic premise of decentralized decision making and lean agile budgeting. With lean agile budgeting, we're going to attempt to move our budgeting to the value stream level. And in order to do that, we're going to have to make sure that business-oriented decision-making happens up and throughout the stack. When we go to the team, we found ourselves in really good shape because we have product owners. So even if you love Kanban and Flow, we do too. But guess what? We need somebody that can speak for that team and has some authority. So that's the product owner, the product manager in the middle. Most large IT shops, we're here in London. Certainly, I mean, they may make combines or cars right down the street, but I kind of doubt it. Most IT shops often don't have that role, the product manager. But as you look at the responsibilities, it's a little broader than I'm an analyst and I can figure out what happens. I'm going to take some responsibility for making decisions.
Driving it through to implementation.
Exactly. And so then you ask yourself the question, the next level. So we have five big arts, and there are some dependencies. And maybe the purist might go, oh, there you go, you shouldn't have those dependencies. Well, frankly, that's a bunch of bull. You shouldn't have the ones you don't need. You shouldn't have, basically architectural layer dependencies. You shouldn't have that. But if I have 3 or 4 arts that can really build value, the odds that my customer has great appreciation of the value that spans the arts is pretty high. So we want to isolate the concerns where we can, and we don't want the technological dependencies. But if my product needs some input from this other product to deliver extra value, I want to harmonize that. So that's the role then of the value stream manager. Who's ever heard of that? Well, I haven't. We just had to put a title on the responsibility for coordinating that work across arts.
Well, here's a related question from Martin, a different Martin. It's related to solutions as well. And he's asking, do you have some good examples or hints on how to make solutions integration work from Agile release trains, if you will, working in different areas? Let's say one building software, one building hardware, one building CPUs.
Right. So so SAFE is a work in process, okay? We already mentioned that. Just last night, I posted on the safe.com website a blog post, an article that Harry Keeneman from 321 Gang, who works mostly in really big systems, and Alex, who is kind of my technical partner in crime, talked about the challenges of, quote, continuous integration or even frequent integration. And they lay out in that article that the goal, of course, is, I'll pretend like it's a satellite, that I can continuously integrate every day and have that whole satellite really work right. But it doesn't. Yeah. So given that I can't really do that, well, maybe I'll just bail out and say, okay, then a month before shipment, we'll do the integration. And what they do is they map out a strategy that basically provides some economic trade-offs and some decision-making that says you have to figure out what has to be integrated and how frequently. So people that build big systems are smart people. They're building big systems. And it's not a matter of, oh, you don't have continuous integration. It's a matter of, well, we can come together in certain cases and integrate these pieces. And in other cases, we're going to have a different frequency. So you don't see this homogeneous, even every 2 weeks in building a satellite and a ground station integration. But I will tell you, if you wait until the month ahead of time, you're going to have a huge problem. So go to scaledagileFramework.com, check the recent blog post, link to that. It's actually on another website. That'll become a guidance article. And one of our responsibilities is to provide ongoing leadership in that area because people are building complex systems and we need to recognize that. And Agile, as powerful as it is a team-based thing. So we have to figure out the principles of Agile and lean it and apply those at scale.
Okay, so let's answer one more question, and hopefully there's a short answer here. It looks like it could be a pretty big topic. But what I'm going to do while Dean answers this and Nick is I'm going to flash to the last few slides. You can see some information on our upcoming training classes, and then I'll get you the PDU information. And I'll leave that slide up so you can write it down. But I'd like to really end this with one more answer because I think it's a really great question. The question's around the paradox of allowing teams and values autonomy or value streams autonomy of what they implement versus those that might need to define and follow a budget and spending and all the issues of OpEx and CapEx. Let's not go there, but how do you distinguish that?
Well, that's a decision that has to be made in the context of the full framework, right? So if we think about what does autonomy mean, do I as a team decide to get out of the MRI business? No. Okay, that's a decision that's made at the corporate level. So and would we ask those teams to say, please decide to get out of the business? No. So do we have full autonomy? Of course not. But in the middle layer, okay, we're building that system now. Are we working with the right people? Absolutely. And then as we move up the pike, we're starting to look at you know, the whole project mentality. There are no projects in SAFE. You know, we should have a sign on there that says no projects. And the reason is projects are temporary work for temporary people. And when we're building value of this type, I don't want either of those things. Yeah. I want persistent people working together to build knowledge, integrating their knowledge, getting better and better at it. And I want to give them a lot of continuous work. So we kill the project metaphor entirely. Now that's painful because project-based funding is the way most of us got here. So that discussion about, you know, decentralized decision-making, it goes up and down through the stack. I'm waving arms as if that helps the audience here. But it basically has to span the entire stack as to what is a good centralized decision and what gets decentralized. So good question, but not one that we can answer in less than another half minute.
Or less than a half hour, for that matter. But thanks for at least starting to address it and giving people things to think of. So we are actually out of time. So again, I'm going to put the TDU slide back up, and I'll leave it there for a few minutes after we close out the webinar. But I want to thank you for your attendance today and joining Dean and Nick. Great presentation, guys, and love the questions that came in as well. So again, we'll follow up with a link to the recording. If you have any further questions, please forward them either to CA or Scaled Agile Inc. directly. And the last resource to go to if you just want to learn more about any of this is scaledagileinc.com. It's a big picture and it's an interactive website, and you can learn guidance in any one of these areas.
My two final thoughts are, one of the XP values is courage. You need to have courage here, but we can be safe at the same time. Sorry about that.
No pun intended. All right, well, again, thanks, Dean. Thanks, Nick. Everybody, thanks for attending today. Goodbye.